So I'd like to introduce Dr. Pat Robbins. She's an assistant professor of management in the School of Business. And I just met Dr. Robbins for the first time on Friday. Yes. Her talk is, I know what I said, but this is what I meant. Tips and tricks for effective verbal and nonverbal communication. Let's join me in welcoming Dr. Robbins.
Okay, thank you so much. This is a topic I really enjoy doing some research on because I think everybody is very interested in the body language element, but it does include, of course, verbal and nonverbal. I've been teaching in higher ed for almost 17 years, and 3.5 of those years are here at Adams State. And I teach business, I teach also healthcare administration, I teach a little bit of everything over in the School of Business. And inevitably, communication comes up in classes like that, and so learning how to communicate effectively can help all of us both professionally and personally. So I guess I would call myself kind of an observer of people. I watch what they do, what they say, and sometimes try to interpret what's really going on. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong, I suppose. So I did some research on this to kind of expand my knowledge about what I do know and what I don't know. So I'm going to start off with, yay, it worked. I'm going to start off with the verbal element, okay? And of course, some of this is probably things you're very aware of, but how we sound and what we say. The way that we say things is probably more important than our actual words of what we're saying. For instance, these are 3 types of voices that are quite common when people are speaking. The dreaded monotone, right? I hope I'm not talking like that now. I don't think I am, but you know that that's the one where not only is the audience bored, but you really think the speaker is probably bored as well and would really rather be somewhere else. Flat, uninteresting. You know, it's not really good for speaking. It's not even really good for making friends or interacting with other people, because you may say, oh, I'm really happy, but your tone is so flat that nobody really believes that, right? So avoid the monotone. Now, the trembling voice, I get to hear this a lot when I make students present in class, right? They tremble a little bit, poor things. But when your voice trembles, you are perceived as being weak, unsure of yourself, nervous, fearful, things like that. And so your emotions are kind of like right there at the surface and very evident for people. So you don't really seem very confident or commanding like you do with the strong voice. Now, when I say strong, it doesn't necessarily mean loud. It just means there's no trembling, there's no monotone, there's no hesitation. You are speaking and you feel like you're very confident about what you're saying. So if I was going to go ask my boss for a raise, well, good luck nowadays, right? But I would have a strong voice. I wouldn't be monotone, that's for sure, and I would try not to tremble when he says no. But I would use a strong voice for sure. So those are, you know, some ways that we will sound. Okay. Now, here are 5 things that we can improve on with our verbal communication skills: speed, pitch, volume, articulation, and pauses. So I don't know about you, but I've heard my voice recorded before, and so I have a pretty good idea of what I sound like, but not everybody, you know, has had that done before. It's a good thing to do. When I heard my voice recorded, I was surprised to find out I had a lower pitch than I thought. I thought I had a higher voice. I used to sing soprano. I don't know how I did that. But I had a lower voice. And probably the most surprising thing was I sounded just like my sister. And in fact, our husbands even had a really hard time telling the difference in my recorded voice and my sister's recorded voice. But neither one of us ever picked up on that, you know, face to face. So you could be very surprised at what you actually sound like. Okay, so with the speed, I like to say you want to speak like an action movie if you want to keep people interested. So if you want to get people excited, energized, you speak fast, right? If you want to create maybe anticipation or suspense, you would speak a little more slowly. If you speak at the same pace, again, it's the drone, it's the monotone. Most of us do vary our speed just naturally, but some people do not, and that's something that, you know, makes us a little more interesting. Now, slow speakers, people who speak slowly all the time, they may not be able to help it, but they're usually perceived as being less intelligent, not as sure of themselves, and we might think they're tired or bored or incompetent, and we might try to finish their sentences. That's not very cool. But that's how slow speakers really come off. People who speak very quickly, very rapidly, we tend to think they know their subject well. They're excited to talk about it. We usually like to listen to people that speak a little more quickly. But remember, you can lose your listener if you talk too quickly, if you talk too fast. So you do have to learn how to pause once in a while. Otherwise, you know, you're going to lose them. If you speak fast, you also seem like you're more authoritarian. You know what you're talking about. But you also speak fast when you get nervous. And I tell students this all the time. If I tell you I want a 5-minute presentation, you practice for about 7 minutes because you're going to zip through it way too fast. And they do, because they just want to get out of there. Also, I did some, when I looked at some of the research, I found that most people prefer someone who talks fast if they have a choice between someone who talks fast and someone who talks slow. They would just rather listen to the quicker sort of speaker. Okay, the pitch. Low pitch, high pitch. Now, that's another way to project authority is with the pitch that you happen to have. High-pitched voices are perceived as being feminine, which there's really nothing wrong with that. But, well, I don't think so. But you also tend to look like maybe you're a little bit timid, even childlike if it's very high and squeaky sort of pitch. Submissive would be another description of the high-pitched voice. But if you have a low-pitched voice, which males tend to have more of than females do, again, you project leadership. You seem more domineering, more interesting, more sure of yourself. People actually listen to you and believe you more if you have a lower pitch. You're more believable. Whether you're really honest or not is, we'll look at body language and see. But the low pitch really does project that. So now males can also have a higher pitched voice sometimes, but it's usually kind of a nasally sound through the nose, and it's kind of an annoying sort of sound. So we all want to strive for a little lower pitched voice if we tend to talk too high. British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher is one female who actually took voice lessons so she could learn how to lower her voice, so she could be more of a leadership model and learn how to speak that way. So you can do it. You just have to practice learning how. Okay, so you need to vary the pitch, and you vary the pitch, again, depending upon what type of inflection you're trying to get across. So downward when you're speaking with authority, you're certain about something. Upward inflection is okay if maybe you're surprised or you're trying to say, I doubt it, you know, or something like that. Now, here's my little simple sentence. And I can repeat this sentence 3 different ways, and depending upon where I put my inflection, it's going to be perceived as meaning something different, even though the same words are up there. So if I say, I did not say I stole the money, it leads you to believe that I might have stolen it, but I'm not saying so, right? Now, if I say, I did not say I stole the money, I might know who stole it, but it wasn't me, right? And if I say, I did not say I stole the money, I probably stole something, but it wasn't money, okay? So that's just an example of how that inflection can really mean, you know, something different. Same little simple sentence. Okay, loudness. Not a lot to say about loudness other than you want to be heard comfortably. And of course you vary the loudness. I'm speaking a lot louder now than I probably would in my home or something like that. But it's kind of like too loud is bad, too soft is bad, sort of like in between. If people speak too loudly, it annoys and irritates other people usually. If they speak too softly, they seem timid and unsure, and we're struggling to listen, and we may just quit listening because it's just too hard to try to hear what they're saying. So sometimes you can shout things, though. You might want to draw attention to something or emphasize a point. And so you might shout it, but you have to be careful, otherwise you seem like you're really an angry person if you shout a lot. A long time ago when I was an undergrad, I used to have a professor who incidentally taught science, and he would speak, you know, you could hear him just fine, but if the class was getting a little bit rowdy and it was a very large class, he would start whispering and talking very softly. And what that meant was he was giving us test questions and he was giving us information. So that was his, you know, mode rather than shouting at us and telling us to pay attention. It actually worked pretty well in those days. I'm not so sure it would work now. I don't think I would try it in my class. But so, you know, not too loud, not too soft, just right. And you do want to vary softness and loudness depending upon what you're trying to get across. All right, articulation. I hope mine is not too sloppy. But sharpening your articulation is important. Mumblers. Anybody know some mumblers, right? Yeah. When people mumble, not sure why they do it. Maybe they don't realize they're mumbling. Maybe they're hearing what they're saying in their head. But it detracts from the meaning because you're struggling so much to try to decipher what they're actually saying. And they may be speaking loud enough, but they're mumbling. They're misunderstood a lot whenever they mumble. And people just usually kind of turn off and stop listening when somebody mumbles. It's just too hard for us. Sloppy speech. Sloppy speech is associated with being poorly educated, maybe being lazy or even nervous. And we don't always realize we may have sloppy speech. Do we pronounce those T's in articulation? Do we pronounce those words very, very carefully? A lot of us get a little bit sloppy with that. Also, sometimes when people have an accent, right? The speech can be perceived as sloppy, and I'm not trying to be disparaging of people with accents, but it can be perceived as sloppy because certain letters or words are not pronounced correctly, or they're kind of a sloppy sort of way of saying it. So if you tend to have the accent or tend to kind of take shortcuts with the way that you speak, you would want to try to say, I would say, speak like a newscaster. If you've ever noticed people on any of the news programs, they seem usually to not have much of a dialect, much of an accent at all, because they've practiced that. They've practiced that over and over. But they articulate generally very, very well. And I like to listen to people that can articulate really well. Another thing I could add about articulation when it comes to sloppy speech, and again, this is another story about me. I was a freshman. I was taking that dreaded speech class, you know, and you have to read a children's story in front of the whole class. I think all speech professors, instructors use that one. So I picked the little gingerbread boy, you know, the one that ran away from the oven and all that sort of stuff. And I read it very carefully. And I remember when I was finished, I was just standing there hoping I pronounced everything correctly. And all he said was, I like the way you say catch. He said, you didn't say catch. I was like, phew. Thank you. But how many times do we say catch, or we say fur, or something like that, rather than for, or catch, and we're not careful. We get sloppy. So we want to be more attuned to how we're pronouncing. Less is more. What I'm referring to with less is more is speaking concisely and really not talking too much. Not talking too much. People who kind of ramble or go around the point or just go on and on and on. My dad used to call this, please give me the Reader's Digest version, so to speak. People like that are kind of hard to follow. You can't exactly figure out what they're talking about. So less is more, meaning don't talk too much. If you want to create a sense of mystery about yourself, don't talk so much. Don't give away everything about yourself all the time. If you are going for a job interview, of course you don't want to talk too little because you want to answer the questions they're asking you and give them all the adequate information. But did you know you can actually talk too much as well? Yeah. Some of us who've interviewed before go, yeah, we know. We've heard it before. So, less is more, mumbling, sloppy speech. Whoops. Didn't go anywhere. Okay. I already talked a little bit about pauses when I was talking about speaking like an action movie. And by the way, this is the last part of the verbal, and we'll get into the nonverbal. But pauses are important to give your listener time to kind of process and think about what you just said. It can also be used to create anticipation if you just simply pause. But you don't want to overuse the pause, because if you overuse the pause, again, you seem to be hesitant. So rule of thumb is you pause 1 to 3 seconds. Now, that may sound like it gets a little complicated, but most of us know how to pause and when to pause, because it's what we would call a verbal comma or an oral comma. It's not where you would really put it in the written sentence, but it is a way of pausing, and we call that, the verbal comma. So use pauses to create the anticipation and the impact that you want. Okay. All right, now the fun part. I have to have a drink of water and pause. So. All right, so when I was doing the research on the nonverbal or the body language, I started thinking about, okay, good, so I'm up here, I'm talking about body language, and they're analyzing every move I make, what I do with my mouth, how I stand, etc., etc. Hopefully you're not, but it is something you could do. So what I found is really the matchup between what you say and the way that you move your body and gesture and what's happening. And I kind of did a little bit of studying about what we call clusters. And with the clusters, what you find out is it may be more reliable to actually interpret a cluster of behaviors rather than just focusing on one body part. Now, it's okay to do that. You might focus on, like, people's feet will tell you something, their eyes definitely tell you things, their hands, their posture. But if you look at clusters, you can figure things out usually a little more quickly. And so that's why I picked the clusters. Now, I am going to talk about the face when we get to towards the end of this. But I like the idea of the different clusters and the things that you will discover with those. By the way, who do you think is better at reading body language, men or women? Women. By far. By far. Yes, we are. Don't know why, I guess, but the research shows that time and time again that women are better at sensing the body language of other people and what the messages actually are than men are. So, okay, so here's some clusters for what we call dominant body language. Now, with dominant body language, look at size signals. Okay, you'll see these size signals. And these are things like you make your body big. So how do you make your body big? You put your hands on your hips like this. You stand like this, or you stand up very straight and tall. You take up more space is what you're trying to do. And everybody knows that when you got the hands on the hips, you're probably angry or upset about something, but it's a dominating gesture, you know, when you make the body actually big, or to make yourself higher. Now, if you're not tall, well, if you're tall, you have an advantage. You're already higher than everybody else. You're bigger. But if not, you get everybody lower than you. Now, how do you do that? You stand up, they sit down. That's how you have the size signal there for dominating body language. Or you sit on a very tall chair, or you wear high heels if you happen to be a female. It gives you an advantage because you're bigger than them. Another thing you can do with size is you can occupy territory. And by occupying territory, you can stand too close to people. And I know you've probably all heard about, you know, the bubble and getting too close and people back up, and it's actually kind of this dance to see people back up and go forward. But I actually set up my office so that the desk is here, and I have my little protected area. I didn't really think about that, but that is a way that we attempt to keep people from invading our territory, is by putting something in front of us that they cannot, you know, get past, or it's harder to get past. Okay, some other signals that tell us that someone is being dominant is the superiority signals, and those are things like breaking social rules. And breaking social rules are things like interrupting people when they're talking, coming late to a meeting, right? Because I'm so important, you've got to wait for me before you can start. Or, surprisingly, also swearing. You know, just kind of casual swearing in an environment where it wouldn't really be acceptable to do that. That's actually a dominant behavior as well, because it's breaking a social rule. Ownership. Now, ownership refers to owning things that could be perceived as status symbols, okay? Now, it's okay to own a status symbol. This isn't really what it's saying. It's the way that you display that particular status symbol. It's casual flaunting of whatever it is. Oh, what time is it? Oh, let me see on my Rolex, right? Something like that. Or, let's take my car. It's a Lamborghini. I wish. It's not. Or, hand me my purse. It's a Chanel. The ladies probably know what that is, expensive purse. So, but it's this casual thing. You know, you're not really bringing it up, you're just kind of pointing it out. That is a way of saying, you know, I'm dominant, I'm superior to you in some way. Invasion also kind of goes along with occupying territory, but with invasion, they may do things like sit in your office chair, lean on your desk, lean on your car, pick up personal things, you know, and start looking at things. That's another way of actually invading space or invasion of some sort. Touching you is also another thing. Now, how do we belittle people? We belittle people in different ways, but there's a couple of signals that have nothing to do with really what you say. The old eye roll, right? Yeah, I used to roll my eyes at my mom. Oh, gosh. You know, we all do that. But also, you know, your feet, where your feet are pointing. If your feet are pointing away from someone, it's a belittling gesture because you're not paying attention to them. Even if I'm looking at you, if my feet are pointing elsewhere, I'm really not interested in you very much because I'm ready to get out of here, wherever my feet are pointing. The dominant greeting with the handshake. You may be familiar with this, but when people shake hands with you and they're trying to dominate you, they put their hand on top of yours. They squeeze your hand just a little bit too hard, and they don't let go quite when they should. They hang on just a little bit too long. That's a dominant handshake. Their eyes, like I said, you know, they may, you know, roll their eyes or something. But another thing that they do when they're trying to dominate you with their eyes, you know, and they're shaking your hands, they will do one of two things. They will stare intently into your eyes. And I don't mean like making eye contact like you're supposed to. I mean they stare at you too long, so it's actually like they're out staring you, right? And it becomes uncomfortable. Or they do the opposite. They won't look at you because you're not worth it, right? looking the other way or something like that. The first person to speak controls the conversation. That's a dominant gesture as well. So if you want to control the conversation, be dominant, you have to speak first. Now, the way you can respond to that, if you don't really like it, which a lot of us don't really like it, with the handshake, you can attempt to turn their hand over the other way. Or does anybody know about the elbow grab that you can actually do too? You've got your hand out there and they're shaking your hand. You can reach around and get their elbow, you know, and make them kind of let go and control that handshake in a way. That's one way you can do it with the handshake. You can also, of course, speak first or be the first one to speak. If they touch you, touch them right away or be the first one to touch them or something like that. That's a response. If they try to interrupt you, talk faster, say I'm not finished, just keep going. And you can outstare them by looking at the bridge of their nose. Then you don't have to look right into their eyes. Right. Unless it's a grizzly bear, and then I don't think you're supposed to look at him, right? Or something, I don't know. Okay, so those are dominant body language. So you may recognize some of these. You know, you may have seen some of these displayed. Okay. Attentive. Many of these are very obvious, but some of them are not so obvious. If someone is really listening to us, they're not easily distracted. They're not going to pick up the phone. They're not going to interrupt or, you know, be prone to interruptions. So they'll ignore any type of interruptions or distractions. They usually sit very still. They tilt their head maybe to try to kind of figure out what you're saying. People who are really listening actually blink less, you know, because they're looking at you and listening to you. They furrow the brow because they're trying to understand. Also, they're patient. Even for people that might be speaking a little slowly, if we're truly listening, we wait for them without any type of fidgeting or twirling things around and letting them finish. We also will have an open body rather than closed body. And open body depends upon, of course, whether you're sitting or standing. But open body refers to the palms are going to be out somehow. Because if your palms are turned this way, that's not open. That's a closed position. This is a closed position too. In fact, this is kind of like back off. Get away from me sort of position. Also, your feet are pointing more out rather than they would be straight or in or something like that. If you're seated, you're not crossing your legs. So you have an open body. You're facing them, okay? You're actually facing them. So that will tell you also if someone is really listening to you or not. Now, I know I can hear people if they're standing behind me, but they don't really perceive that I'm listening to them because I'm not facing them and I don't have that open body. We nod our heads, we make little sounds like, yeah, you're right, uh-huh, something like that. Those are kind of the interest noises. We also reflect back in some ways. Now, we can reflect back by paraphrasing what they're saying to us, but we might also reflect their body language. And reflecting someone's body language is actually a way of saying, I'm interested in you, I'm listening to you. And it's not like you're mimicking them or copying them, but you will actually copy their gestures to a certain degree because it builds rapport. It makes you more like them. And if you're more like them, then you automatically have a better connection. So reflecting back is always really good to try to do as well. I have a video where you'll see a little bit of reflecting going on. Okay, the language of boredom. I have to confess that I display some of these behaviors sometimes. I guess I get bored. But I try to be a little more aware of what I'm actually doing. If you're bored, you look around. You doodle on a little pad, you know, maybe if you're in a meeting or something like that. You look at the clock, you look at your watch because you're kind of watching the time. You talk to somebody else, right? You put your headphones in. And those are things that are really pretty obvious, but things that are not always so obvious are repetitious things, repetition. Watch people and see if they do things like tap their foot or drum their fingers maybe on the table or something like that. or twirl their hair around, or play with their jewelry if they're, you know, have a necklace on or something like that. I've learned that I can't sit on those chairs that twirl around, you know, because I'm just like a kid. I'll start twirling around in it. And so I got to sit on one that's stable, because that really does make people think that you're bored if you're doing that. Or if you yawn, you know, I'm really tired, you're looking out the window, you're daydreaming. Also the way you sit, if you're really slouched down, it's perceived that you're really bored rather than maybe being comfortable. Like some of you guys are actually like kind of forward like this. That means you're listening. If you're kind of tipped forward just a little bit, that's a signal that you are. Reason we get bored, obviously we're not interested. So, you know, I try to watch students and think, okay, I got to jazz it up a little bit. I'm losing them here. But with readiness, I'm referring to maybe they're just not ready to hear what you're saying. You know, maybe it's a topic that is maybe uncomfortable or controversial or something like that, and they're getting bored because they're kind of struggling not to react or something like that. So there's different reasons that people get bored. Too much information all at once, I can't process it, those sorts of things. Now, I put power body language up here, and you're going to see some similarities with dominance, but the reason I put power up here separately is because power is really more of a positive thing. Dominance is a little bit more of a negative sort of thing. So when I'm talking about power, again, I'm talking about the handshake, and where you would like to, of course, have your hand on top, but a better way to do it where it's more positive is you put your arm out like this, straight, right? This is also a way of keeping them at a distance, right? Because this is what we call the royal handshake. This is as far as you get to me because we just have a professional relationship. The closer you are to somebody, the more intimate the relationship. So the handshake can be like that. You can also do the elbow grab again or something of that nature. If you want to be in power, offer your hand first. And I always advise women, be the first one to offer to shake a hand if the other person is a male. Anybody know why I say that? That's There's actually a couple reasons I say that. Because in the past, sometimes, and not so much nowadays, but sometimes men were actually a little bit unsure whether they were supposed to shake a woman's hand. Now, we don't necessarily have that problem now. But it's just always a good idea because that way they don't have to worry about it. You've already offered your hand. And because men seem to be the more powerful or the dominant, then, you know, just issuing the hand first gives you a little bit of an edge and shows that, you know, you're confident and you're a powerful person. So you want to be able to do that first. Touching, also if you touch someone first, that is, you know, a sense of power, but you do want to be very careful how you touch them. But if you're going to shake their hand, you're obviously touching them first, or if you're reaching around and getting their elbow, you're touching them first too. But you do it a little more subtly than if you're trying to dominate. You don't do it in an offensive sort of way. Speaking, when people are using power body language when they're speaking, they do things like this. They pound their fist. They're trying to get their point across. Or they point their finger, right? Do you hear what I'm saying? That sort of thing. And it's almost like a beat or something like that nature. Emoting is another thing that shows you are in power, but it's kind of like you're struggling to keep that power. Emoting means you're trying to control your emotions. And so some of the things people do to control their emotions is they bite their lip. You know, they'll kind of bite their lower lip. Or they'll even try to keep their mouth like together, you know, so that they're not actually, or they're biting the inside of their cheek. You can see them kind of chewing on the inside of their cheek. Or they might even kind of put their hand over their mouth like this. What they're doing is they're trying to hide an emotion that's about to come out. I'm going to cry, you know, I'm getting really nervous, different things like that. When Bill Clinton was When he was being interviewed about the Monica Lewinsky scandal, they actually counted the number of times that he was emoting, meaning the number of times that he was actually biting his lip and trying to hide his emotion, and it was actually hundreds of times that he was actually doing that, you know, that we know now he wasn't being honest. But that was a body language thing that was evident even then. So that says, I am powerful, I'm in control, and you're not going to upset me, basically is what it says, because I'm controlling my emotions. But look at their mouth, because you can tell. When we are walking our power walk, right, we stand up straight, we swing our arms, we take big steps, and we always walk in front of other people. Make them follow you. Don't keep looking back. Don't drag along behind, you know. Make them follow you, because that says you're in power. Also, did you know opening the door for someone is another gesture of power? Now, we think of it as being polite, most of us. I think it's okay to do that. But it really is a power gesture in many ways. So, yeah. So open the door for people. Yeah, it is. But I wouldn't say it's a bad thing necessarily. Position. And I was talking about being in front of people, but also position, again, power is being higher, being taller, getting them lower than you. But also, some people that are powerful will drive a vehicle that is taller. They'll drive a Hummer or an SUV rather than, you know, a little short, slinky car. She drive one of those. That also, on the road, it really does say power if you really think about it. It really does say power. So that's the, you know, some of the power of body language, and that's what this video is about. I don't know if you've heard of Tonya Ryman, but she is actually a body language expert. And I may have a commercial in here, and if so, I apologize. Okay.
Hi there, I'm Tonya Ryman. I'm the author of The Power of Body Language. We're here on the streets of Manhattan today because what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick out some people and show you the right way to do things and perhaps the wrong ways to do things. One of the most interesting facets of body language is just what you can read from one single body part. So what do I mean by that? Well, when you're talking to someone, one of the first things you want to do is look at their feet. So if I'm talking to you straight on, yet my feet are pointed this way, you need to recognize that I'm on my way out. I'm not interested in what you have to say. I'm looking to move. So one of the things you always want to remember is the feet point to where their body wants to go. So this is a power position, and what that woman is demonstrating is that she feels good about herself. She's in what's known as a figure 4, which is a position that takes up more space than the average seating space. Her arms are pulled back, saying, I don't feel vulnerable, I'm powerful. One of the things that's interesting about men is they're always telling you unconsciously how sexual they are. So if you're walking towards a man and he has his hands in his pocket, you know what he's doing? He's trying to point out his best asset. So,
sorry.
Look at what their hands are doing. Are their hands pointed to their most significant areas? If they are, they're sending you a very strong message. You know, it's funny, I get asked all the time, why is it that I have to work so much harder to get a man's attention than they do to get my attention? Well, the truth is that women are much better at picking up body language clues than men are. For an example, if I'm trying to flirt with a man, I need to make eye contact with him 3 times to let him know that I'm really interested in him. So one of the things you can do as a woman is you can make eye contact, look down, look back up, look down again, and finally that 3rd time of making eye contact with that man, he's going to get the hint. If you don't do it that way, ladies, they're never going to get the hint. How often are people surprised at what I tell them? Usually they're shocked. Usually people have no idea how they come across. And the interesting thing is once you point out a simple clue to them, they suddenly go, oh my goodness, it's as if they had their aha moment. And their aha moment can change them forever. So what you're watching is the intimate zone space dance. And what do I mean by that? You just witnessed a woman and a man having a conversation. The woman isn't really that comfortable with the gentleman, but he doesn't recognize it. So he takes a step forward. And what does she do? She takes a step back. He's so ignorant, doesn't get it. He takes another step forward. Finally, she takes another step back. And you can see that these two will never be in rapport because he doesn't understand the space difference. So what you're seeing here is a couple holding hands. What's interesting about this is who is the more powerful of the two? Whose hand was on top? It was the man's hand. And if you watch people who hold hands, you'll notice typically the man does hold his hand on the top. And that's his way of demonstrating that he's the powerful one in the relationship. You know, what you need to realize is that every single thing says something about you. The way you hold your posture, the way you wear your makeup, the way you wear your hair. Do you have tattoos everywhere? Where are your piercings? Are your shoes nice and polished? Is your briefcase in good shape? Is your suit ironed? Do you look good? Every single thing about you makes a statement. What you want to make sure is it's making the statement that you're happy with.
And of course, she wants you to buy her book. Okay. Now, when she was talking about the intimate zone dance, one thing I wanted to add to that is one way you can also see this, it's very interesting, is next time you're in an elevator that's really crowded, and if it's really crowded, we're all standing very close to each other, but you'll notice that we try very hard not to make eye contact, right? Because we don't know these people. And so as people get off the elevator, and try to be the last one to get off or something, as people get off the elevator and there's only two of you left on the elevator, if you notice people start to shuffle until they're further and further apart, and if there's two people that do not know each other on an elevator, they're across from each other in the elevator, but they won't look at each other. You can almost bet on it because people are kind of uncomfortable in that small space with total strangers, and it becomes quite evident. Okay. Now, this is facial signals, and with facial signals, you can look at them in clusters, but really most experts will tell you that the eyes pretty much have it when we are looking at facial signals, because eye contact is generally seen as a gesture of honesty. Now, this is cultural, though. You know, this is cultural, and that's because in some cultures you do not make direct eye contact because it can actually be seen as offensive. But generally we see it as honesty, and that it is, again, a power play when you make eye contact. It says you're confident. If people are very shy, they cannot make eye contact. So I'm going to play this one on how to spot a liar, because he talks about eyes, not only just the eye contact, but also, you don't have to continually look at somebody to be honest either. And he is something to do with law enforcement. I'm trying to remember. Oh, sure. I can't. Skip that. Thank you. Pause.
Back. Do you ever wonder
Pause. Yeah.
I was wondering, do all people act the same way, though?
From culture to culture?
Yes. I mean,
I'm not an expert in all cultures. There are some similarities, though, and one of the things that I'm going to talk about with the facial gestures is another study that was done with people who are blind and people who are sighted and what their faces look like, and they have actually found exactly the same muscles, same gestures. Okay? So if you are sad, and even though you've never seen a person, you know, if you're blind, you still display the same features on your face as sadness, happiness, etc. So, I don't know. I don't know. Okay, here we go.
someone is lying to you? Well, there are some things that you can look for to find the truth.
And we brought in a polygraph examiner to put 5 people to the test and show you how to be a human lie detector.
Did you ever see anything valued at more than $10, $25?
No.
Are you basically a dishonest person?
Basically a dishonest person?
This polygraph examiner and retired FBI agent doesn't need a machine to pinpoint a liar.
The eyes are a window to the soul. You can see right through them.
What do they expect from me? That's a good question.
Take a close look at this guy's eyes. Before Jason answers, he looks up to the right.
Looking up to the right means you're making up something. You're visually picturing something That's never happened, you know. That's a lie.
Up to the left, you're remembering something. Only problem, it's the opposite for lefties, like Jason, so he's telling the truth. Shifty eyes could also indicate dishonesty.
The moment they complete that lie, they look right back at me because they're trying to see whether I'm buying what they're selling.
Bill Brown says all of the people we interviewed are basically honest. Look at how comfortably they sit in their chair. Liars may rub their neck, tap their fingers, look at their watch, all signs of nervousness.
Or they'll position something between you and them, even if it's only a book or a coffee cup. When you see something like it, yeah, but why is that? It's just getting a barrier or something between you and me.
Someone telling a fib may lean back in their chair, sit to the side, and keep their arms crossed and hands tightly folded in their lap.
Did you ever put any false information on any form?
On any form? No.
What about people who try to change the conversation?
It makes almost everybody a little bit uncomfortable lie. So if they can say something else in a tangential way and get you to accept that, then they don't have to lie.
And really listen to what they're saying and how they say it.
If all the time you've been talking to them, they've been speaking in one voice, and then all at once they speak in this voice, pretty good indication.
Pretty insightful, and Bill says liars will most likely do a combo of those things, so you have to look out for that. But there's also some things that they just cannot control at all, affected by the autonomic nervous system, and we put that list, if you want to check it out on our website, koco.com, if you're really trying to see
Really
if someone's being
interesting.
honest or not.
And I was talking to you about this earlier, talked to Bill Brown before you interviewed him, because you were
Right.
getting everybody ready, and I was thinking, you know, I don't know, you know,
I don't know what
it's
to do
the
with my
truth.
hands,
I was just
I
kind of
don't know,
like,
yeah.
Okay, anyway, enough of that. But he is talking about clusters. You know, he is talking about clusters. He talks about the eyes, but then he talks about speaking in a different voice, you know, or putting something in between you and different gestures like that. So interesting when you think about, you know, you don't have to necessarily make eye contact to be honest. It's where they look, you know, whether they're making up that story or whether they're searching for, trying to remember whatever it is. Nostrils, mouth, forehead, all of these different things. When you lie, you also may have a sneer kind of on your mouth, you know, because that's a sign of contempt. You know, you've caught me and I'm kind of sneering. Or people actually, when they're angry, may bare their teeth. You may not really realize that, but they kind of like grit their teeth and bare their teeth, and nostrils flare. Another thing is the head movement. This is something to really pay attention to, too. If you ask somebody a question and they say no, but they say no like this, they actually nodded their head yes, so they probably are lying whenever they do that.
There's a cultural difference.
Oh, okay, tell me.
Students that were from India,
Mm-hmm.
and the first one, as I was explaining something, he would do this, which, you know, I'm used to people nodding, like, yes,
Right.
I understand.
Okay.
He would shake his head, and it drove me nuts. But finally, I asked him about it, and he finally explained to me that in India, this means agreement, and not what I was used to. And then later on, I met another person from India who did exactly the same thing.
Wow.
That's when I was ready for it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this would be very interesting to do culturally and see the differences. But it's not congruent, you know, when you're saying one thing and your head is doing something else. So you could even turn it around, you know, with people from India too, you know, as long as you know what the gesture means from the culture. But it should be congruent, and if it's not, there's something just kind of off there. Let's see, what else? Oh, the other thing I was going to talk about with this is the smile. We all know about the phony smile. You know how to smile in a phony way, I'm sure. It's still, again, it's your eyes. It's your eyes. It's not how much, you know, how many teeth you show or how big the grin is. You got to have a few little wrinkles here. Otherwise, it's not really a sincere smile. You know, it's just kind of like this and going on. So, but it's the same with anger. People can actually try to look angry. My dad used to do this for my mom's benefit, but all you had to do was look at his eyes and you knew whether he was really mad at you or not. Because again, the eyes really give you away. The eyes really tell you a lot about a person. Okay. I know, some of them look very unhappy, don't they? These are just some of your, you know, your basic facial gestures. that are quite common. And this facial expressions video that I want to show you is about a name named Dr. David Matsumoto. And he's the one who studied the blind and the sighted athletes, is actually what he did, because he wanted to find out, you know, what their facial expressions were like. This is about a 3-minute one here. So, play this one for you. Okay, how do I skip? Oh, I don't.
We can tell how other people are feeling just by looking at them. When someone is happy, they smile. When they are sad, they frown. But where do these facial expressions come from? Are they learned or are they innate? David Matsumoto studied these questions for years in his Culture and Emotion Research Lab at San Francisco State.
Facial expressions are so important because they are part of a nonverbal communication system that we all have, and we use extensively when we communicate with others. Facial expressions comment on the words in many different ways so that you know that a person may be joking or they may be very serious. I think this is why we have emoticons in email. Facial expressions are very difficult to study in the lab because when people are in the lab, they're watching what they're doing. And so oftentimes what you get in the laboratory is not what occurs in real life.
David realized there was a better setting to study expressions, the 2004 Summer Olympic Games. It just so happened he was headed there anyway, as a researcher for the International Judo Federation.
The Olympics is the perfect place to do one of these studies because it's real life, it's naturalistic, it's very emotional.
He then turned his eye and the camera toward the Para-Olympic Games.
By studying the expressions of the blind athletes in the Paralympic Games, and then comparing them to the expressions of the athletes in the sighted, the regular Olympic Games, we can tell whether they have the same expressions or not.
And the result?
Those who won showed signs of true enjoyment. Those who lost showed sadness, distress, fear, or anger. And they were the exact same facial muscle movements that occurred in both the sighted and the blind. They occurred in both exactly the same times, in exactly the same ways. And they differentiated winners and losers in exactly the same ways. And so the findings were amazingly similar. So the study of the blind athletes in the Paralympic Games showed us conclusively that the source of facial expressions of emotions must be resident in some innate biological program that we all have, that we're born with, and that we have from birth. And that everybody all around the world, as long as you're a human, has that. And I think that that's a very powerful message that this study shows.
So the next time you see someone smile or frown, remember, you are seeing an expression of their DNA.
So, I thought that study was pretty interesting. Yeah, so I suppose it remains to be seen. They'll probably do more studies and such, but it was interesting to make the comparison there. Okay, I don't want to go too long, a little bit more. Here is another thing that I just kind of added on that also includes nonverbal communication. And some of these we already talked about, so I won't talk about all of them. But things such as clothing and artifacts, the way that we dress. With clothing, there is the idea that if you dress like other people, then you're trying to fit in. If you dress very differently, you might be trying to rebel or kind of be more of an individual. But the other thing about clothing, too, is that people try to fit in by wearing a uniform many times. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about the uniform that, you know, a police officer has to wear because they have to wear it, but of course they do have to fit in, or those sorts of things. But a uniform could be the lab coat, you know, that you have to wear or you should wear if you're in the health field or something like that. Or even the business suit would be considered a uniform. And so people will do that because they want to fit into the culture of wherever they happen to be working. People tend to respect other individuals who wear uniforms. For some very strange reason, if they have a uniform on, we tend to trust them just because they're wearing that uniform. So the clothing sends a message. Lots of messages that I could talk about more and more. Our possessions, of course, again, if they're flaunted, those send a message. Colors. Now, I don't know what you know about colors, but colors tell a story as well. You know, that's another way of communicating in a nonverbal way. The color red is a color that's meant to bring attention to you, and also it can be seen as a powerful color, an exciting color. So if you like red, or you drive red, or you wear red, or whatever, that's what you're saying. Whether you mean to say it or not, that is what you're truly saying. And then, of course, there's orange, and orange is energy and warmth, is what orange tends to say. Yellow is happiness. I guess that's why that smiley face is yellow. They probably picked that out on purpose. Green is kind of a natural color. And blue is by far, if you ask people what their favorite color is, the majority of people will say blue is their favorite color. In fact, mentalists will even use this to their advantage in guessing what people are thinking about their favorite color, because so many people will actually be thinking that it's blue. Blue is trustworthy, you know, true blue, so to speak. Also kind of a calming sort of color. Brown is stability, dependability. I think that's why UPS probably uses brown. You know, I really think that's probably the reason. Gray is wisdom, you know, if you wear gray or you like gray, wisdom and dignity. And black is an authoritarian color. And so black, generally, people will wear black if they want to be seen as being in authority, at least for that period of time. But remember, it can also be the car you drive, or, you know, your possessions, your furniture, different things like that. The colors say something about you beyond just liking the color. Bodily characteristics. What I was thinking about here, again, was you know, the actual physical body. If you're very large, you know, tall and big, you definitely have an advantage that people will be a little bit intimidated by you, and it's very hard to intimidate if you are physically small, but you can use some of the techniques we talked about, you know, with power and dominance if you want to be a little more dominating. I think I talked already about space and touching, but you will notice that some people can be very clueless about other people's body language when it comes to space. Just like Tonya Ryman was kind of showing the male and the female, and she kept backing off, he kept getting closer. But just try putting your arm around somebody and pay attention to what they do. Do they kind of go like this, or you know? And it's usually pretty obvious whether they're comfortable with you doing that or not. You know, and if someone does it to you, you're giving it away, whether you know, like it or you do not appreciate it. Another thing about space, ever had anybody crowd you in the cashier line, get a little bit too close to you with their, you know, their card or something like that? That makes us uncomfortable as well, but it's an aggressive move. It's an aggressive move to get you out of the way. Okay, last slide that I had. Too many muscles, can't control it anyway, why bother? They're even talking about how it's part of your DNA. Well, you can probably control your body language to a certain degree, basically by being aware of what you're doing. And you know, you can practice obviously having an open body so that you seem more friendly and that you're interested in people. You can practice doing the handshake the way that you want to do the handshake. You can practice building rapport by reflecting back other individuals' body language or paraphrasing what they say. So you can practice some of this sort of stuff, and you can control it to a certain degree. But remember, you know, your face is ultimately what's going to give you away when we talk about body language. I have one more slide, but whoops, go back, go back. Whoa. Okay. Do I have time to show the yes factor? Sure. Okay. All right.
chapter of the yes factor. Get what you want. Get what you want, say what you mean, the secrets of persuasive communication. Today I want to chat with you about the yes factor. What is the yes factor? Yes is empowerment. Yes, you got the date. Yes, you breezed through the sales presentation. Yes, you aced the job interview and got the job. Yes, you landed the new client. Each and every time we see someone, we're negotiating for that all-important yes. What I'd like to do now is talk to you about how you can enrich the impression you make on others. So let's talk for a few minutes about how you can communicate with authority. Here we see Sarah going in for a promotion. It's imperative that Sarah come across as serious, confident, and calm. Take a look at what she's doing. Notice how she holds these papers in front of her. It tells us that she doesn't know her material. And if she doesn't know her own material, why would her manager feel she was worthy of a promotion? Her body language is also closed. In order to seem confident, you need to have open posture. So now you understand why it's so important that you learn the proper way to communicate with authority. Let's move forward now and discuss establishing rapport. One of the great things about the yes factor is we discuss how to build rapport quickly and easily. And building rapport is essential to building relationships. Why? Because it teaches you how to connect with people. So here, Christy is demonstrating open communication. The best way to hit it off with a coworker is to use similar gestures. So if they're gesturing high, you gesture high. Hold a similar posture and stance, whether their weight is balanced on both legs or if they're standing off to the side. Anything that gives the impression that you're similar to the listener is going to help you connect with that person. So we can make this encounter even stronger with the use of verbals. We can mirror not only their body language, but we can also mirror their words. What does this translate into? Well, depending upon who you're talking to, they're probably going to be using one of three systems. What if they're a visual person and they tend to use visual terms? For example, they might say something like, "Do you see what I mean?" A great response would be absolutely crystal clear. An auditory phrase might be something along the lines of, "Do you hear what I'm saying?" And a great response to that would be, "Sounds good to me." What if their language tends to be more tactile? How does that feel to you? A great response to that might be something along the lines of, "I get the sense it's a real winner." Always remember, a good communicator listens. A great communicator reflects back the emotions. Finally, I want to talk to you about exuding confidence during a presentation. You know, most of us get really nervous when we have to give a presentation, especially if we're talking about our own ideas. So what I want to talk to you about is how you can make that presentation strong and powerful. And the two ways to do that is using strong, powerful words and confident body language. So here's an example of a speaker who's trying to captivate her audience. When you watch, recognize she's not holding direct eye contact with anyone in the group. Look around at the audience. Do they look like they're interested? Notice the one woman taking a very deep breath in and then offering that quick conspiratorial glance at a coworker. This is not a good sign that the speaker is held in high regard. As a speaker, you need to own the room. You want to make eye contact and hold it for a few seconds as opposed to just sweeping over people. Because if you can finish a point while you're looking at someone, you'll feel a much stronger connection. Keep in mind, everything you do, say, and wear makes a statement about you. Is it the statement you want posted on the billboard? So at the end of the day, be fascinating, be confident, and be authentic. And in the end, you'll always be a yes.
I think the main thing I really liked about this video is when she talked about responding in either a tactile, an auditory, or a verbal sort of response. And I thought that was just an excellent way to build rapport, even though it's such a subtle thing, and we don't necessarily pay attention to how people, you know, speak to us. And so that was the main thing I liked. Also, the reflecting, I guess you got to have the same hair, maybe, those two women. I don't know, that was a little bit strange, but you know, just reflecting with the gestures was really good as well. So, to improve this, you know, watch a video of yourself, listen to an audio of yourself, and try to fix the things you don't like, maybe, you know, I don't know. But whatever impression you're trying to get across, you're getting one across, like it or not, so you want it to be the one you know, you really want people to think of you. So, okay, well, thank you so much.
Adams State College. Great stories begin here.